France falls silent for a third day of mourning in memory of the 84 people who were killed in the lorry attack in Nice. The country comes to a standstill, stunned by the third major terror attack in less than 2 years. The French Prime Minister is booed amid strong criticism of the country's security weaknesses. We'll be live with our correspondent in Nice. Also this lunchtime, the man who shot dead 3 police officers in Baton Rouge in the US is revealed as an Iraq war veteran. President Obama urges calm.
Everyone right now focus on words and actions that can unite this country rather than divide it further.
MPs prepare to vote on the Trident nuclear deterrent, with Labour splits on the issue set to be highlighted in the Commons debate. Around 6,000 people are now detained in Turkey after the attempted coup, and thousands of police officers are suspended. And a UK tech firm which designs microchips for smartphones is bought by a Japanese company for £24 billion.
In the south, a mother's tribute to her beautiful son. A murder investigation continues after the death of 17-year-old Jack Gudge in Bournemouth. And after demolition, the search resumes for the 3 missing men at Didcot Power Station.
Good afternoon and welcome to the BBC News at 1. People across France fell silent this morning to remember the 84 people who died in the attack in Nice on Thursday night. The French Prime Minister was booed by mourners after the minute's silence in Nice. More than 80 people remain in hospital. They were injured when the lorry driven by Mohamed Boulel ploughed through crowds celebrating Bastille Day on the promenade. Security has been stepped up across France and 7 people remain in custody in connection with the attack. Tom Burridge is in Nice for us now. And Tom, it's been a very sombre morning.
It really has, Rita. A lot of tears today, a lot of defiance, but also a lot of anger from the people we've been speaking to here in Nice. Because although the profile of the attacker is very different this time around, there is for France a morbid and uncomfortable sense of déjà vu. There are no words for what happened here on the promenade. And for a minute, France was united.
Homo!
Then the national anthem, sung slow and solemn. France is normally a confident country, but now it feels uneasy and more divided. And as the Prime Minister left, people booed and whistled. Some calling on him to resign.
We are not protected. We are not protected. I think the war is here, not in other countries. They are here. And I think they need to be focusing on security more than anything else.
Because the problem is that now we're seeing that these people, they are French. They live in French. How can you live in your country and you try to kill people?
In Nice's mosques, they've been praying for the dead and the injured. Bilal and Mehdi's sister, Dalgia Bouzouit, was one of those killed. A mother to 4 children.
C'est plus politique. On s'en fout de la politique. On est des musulmans.
It's all politics, Mehdi told us. I'm angry with the media. My sister was not killed by a Muslim. There is defiance here, written among the tributes for those who died. You have to walk right along the beach promenade, well into the distance, past the endless piles of flowers and tributes, to fully appreciate the killer's vile tactics. In truth, stopping one deranged individual who's not on the police's radar is incredibly hard. We all never want to admit that this type of attack can alter our way of life, but calls for change in France are now louder. Rita, the former President Nicolas Sarkozy, who we saw there and leader of the opposition here in France, has called for specific and tough law and order measures for pre-trial detention of those suspected of being radicalised and for deporting foreign nationals who are suspected of the radicalisation process itself. Some will accuse Mr. Sarkozy of a divisive, dangerous political game. He's being pushed, of course, by the increasingly popular National Front of Marine Le Pen to the right of him. But others will say his message chimes with what they want, and they simply want the French government to do anything now to prevent another attack.
Tom, thank you. Tom Burridge there. Police in the United States have named the killer of 3 officers in Baton Rouge as Gavin Long, a 29-year-old former Marine who'd served in the Iraq War. Tension in the US has been high since 2 shootings in separate incidents of African-American men by police, one of them in Baton Rouge. This appears to be the second revenge attack in 10 days on police. President Obama has called on all Americans to unite and to avoid using inflammatory language. Here's our Washington correspondent, Laura Bicker.
Baton Rouge is in pain once more, torn apart on a Sunday morning by another shooting. Police had responded to calls that an armed man was on the highway. He turned his gun on them. 3 police officers were killed, 3 others wounded, one of them critically.
It's always, that place is always packed. 24/7. There's always a lot of police officers there. It's maybe it's a 30-second drive from the Baton Rouge Police Department headquarters to that convenience store. So the person who did it knew what he was doing.
An absolutely unspeakable, heinous attack on law enforcement here in Baton Rouge claimed the lives of 2 Baton Rouge police officers, 1 sheriff's deputy, and injured 3 others, one of whom today, right now as we speak, is absolutely fighting for his life. It's unjustified, it's unjustifiable. The violence, the hatred just has to stop.
The gunman who was shot dead at the scene has been identified as Gavin Long. It was his 29th birthday. In online videos, he'd said that only violence could stop the people he called bullies.
Everyone right now focus on words and actions that can unite this country rather than divide it further. We don't need inflammatory rhetoric. We don't need careless accusations thrown around to score political points or to advance an agenda. We need to temper our words and open our hearts, all of us.
Baton Rouge has been a city divided since Alton Sterling was shot by police 2 weeks ago. This viral video started a call for justice, and years of tension between officers and the black community erupted onto the streets in days of demonstrations. Then came this. A lone black gunman took aim at police in Dallas, killing 5 officers. It prompted Montrell Jackson, one of the officers killed, to write this on social media. "These are trying times. Please don't let hate infect your heart." Jackson became a father for the first time only 4 months ago. The 2 other police officers who died were also family men. The call in this city is for peace, but right now it seems so very far away. Laura Bicker, BBC News, Baton Rouge.
MPs will vote today on whether to go ahead with the manufacture of the next generation of nuclear submarines armed with Trident missiles at an estimated cost of £31 billion. Theresa May, in her first statement to Parliament as Prime Minister, is expected to say it would be a gross irresponsibility for the UK to abandon its nuclear weapons. Labour is split on the issue, with Jeremy Corbyn opposing renewal, but the party's MPs will get a free vote. Our political correspondent Ian Watson reports.
The ultimate deterrent, or an aquatic white elephant paying a high price for new submarines armed with nuclear weapons, is controversial. But the government says the cost of not updating Trident would be even greater.
We have to defend our country against all kinds of threats, whether it's terrorism, conventional armed forces or nuclear. There are a lot of nuclear weapons out there. There are rogue states developing them, like North Korea.
Some opponents simply believe nuclear weapons are immoral, The SNP will vote against Trident, and these CND supporters are handing this petition into the MOD, calling for disarmament.
It's a huge international demand now for a global ban on nuclear weapons. That's the way Britain should be going, not rearming with a new nuclear weapons system.
For others, it's about cost and capability. The government says 4 new submarines will cost £31 billion over a 20-year period, with a further £10 billion put aside for contingencies. Opponents argue that there could be cheaper options, and some question whether Trident's necessary in a post-Cold War world. Labour's Shadow Foreign Secretary and Shadow Defence Secretary both say they'll abstain on Trident renewal. That's because they say that a vote here at Westminster later today simply isn't necessary at this time, and the government's playing political games designed to embarrass the opposition. Well, if that really is the government's aim, it's likely to succeed.
I first joined the campaign for nuclear disarmament when I was 16 years old, and I'm still a member, only a short time later.
The Labour leader won't abstain, he'll vote against Trident. But his 2 leadership challengers, Angela Eagle and Owen Smith, will vote in favour.
The world is a more insecure, unpredictable, volatile place than it's felt in the whole of my lifetime. And therefore, I think it isn't the moment for us to unilaterally get rid of our weapons.
And if you're in any doubt that today's vote wasn't as much about Labour's future as the nation's security, well, just listen to the party's pro-Trident deputy leader.
The unions have got a responsibility to stand up for their members and defence workers, and those general secretaries that support candidates who believe in unilateralism will have to answer to their members.
This won't be a cliffhanger vote. Enough MPs will back Trident renewal, but these weapons will also play a part in Labour's bitter internal battle. Ian Watson, BBC News.
Well, in a moment, we'll talk to our assistant political editor, Norman Smith. But first to Katrina Renton, who's in Faslane on the Clyde, where the nuclear submarines are based. And Katrina, what's the mood where you are?
Well, the nuclear submarines here have been based since the 60s, and their presence is divisive. While some would like them to see them retained here, others are very much against them. Now, there's a permanent peace camp outside the base, and campaigners say that there were 37 protests around the country at the weekend ahead of today's vote. Now, the Scottish Government, the SNP government that's in power at Holyrood, would very much like to see them banished. However, that's not up to them. This is not a devolved issue. It remains at Westminster, and that's why today is important. 58 of the 59 Scottish Westminster MPs say they will vote against the renewal of Trident. Only one, Scotland's only Conservative MP, says that he will vote for it. Now, this is a big employer. 8,000 people are employed at the base. On the streets of Helensburgh, the local town here today, I spoke to people, some very much in favour of retaining the base because they say it's important for jobs and the economy. Others saying that they want it away from their town as soon as possible. And this is very much in line with Scottish public opinion. Decisions have been split in the past. The latest poll saying 42% of people here are against it, 43% for it.
And Norman, the government is expected to win this vote, but this issue yet again reveals splits within Labour.
It does. We expect Labour to do a rather inelegant three-way split on the issue, with Mr Corbyn and his backers opposing Trident, others abstaining and others voting to renew it. And I think the real fear of many senior Labour figures, whichever side of the argument they're on, is that uncertainty and division just undermines the party's credibility when it comes to the issue of national security. As for Mr Corbyn, well, he seems remarkably relaxed about this. Why? Well, in part because he remains convinced that in time he will be able to change Labour Party policy so that it opposes Trident and nuclear weapons, in part because he thinks his stance will bolster his campaign in the current Labour leadership contest. But above all, I think, because he has said that he would never press the nuclear button, which means regardless of tonight's vote, regardless if we do build those nuclear submarines under a Corbyn government, they would never be used, which in effect means we would not have that nuclear deterrent.
Norman, thank you. Norman Smith there, and Katrina Renton too in Faslane. One of the UK's most important tech companies, Arm Holdings, has been bought by a Japanese firm for more than £24 billion. The firm, which is based in Cambridge, designs microchips used in most smartphones and employs more than 3,000 people. Its share price soared by 45% on the news of the takeover. Well, our technology correspondent Rory Keflin-Jones is in Cambridge for us now. Rory.
Rita, it's hardly a household name to many, and its headquarters here in Cambridge is modest, not to say a little bit dull. But let's be clear, Arm is the most exciting, innovative British new technology firm created in the last 25 years. It's also part of a long tradition of computing success stories here in Cambridge. So the news that it's losing its independence has caused some sadness here. In an age when chips come with everything, Arm is well placed to be a global technology powerhouse. Its designs are already in Apple's iPhone and just about every other smartphone. So today's news that it's about to become a Japanese-owned firm has not been greeted with huge enthusiasm in Cambridge.
Arm has been the proudest achievement in my life, and this is a very sad day for me, and I think a sad day for technology in Britain.
But Japan's SoftBank, which owns a wide variety of technology businesses, is promising to be a good parent to Arm. Its founder said today the workforce would double and its HQ would remain in Cambridge.
I am very excited to make this announcement. This is the company that I have admired for last 10 years.
Designing the chips which power this and many other devices could be seen as a great British success story. Last week, Theresa May said it might be necessary to block foreign takeovers in important economic sectors. But today her government seemed happy about this deal.
Arm is a great success story, and the fact that a Japanese company just 3 weeks after the referendum decision is prepared to make this kind of commitment to the UK and commit to grow that business here in the UK is a resounding endorsement of the resilience of the British economy and the attractiveness of Britain as a place for international companies to do business.
SoftBank's founder seems confident that this deal is done, but there's still a chance that other overseas companies may be interested in owning Arm, the jewel in the crown of British technology. Now, you heard in that piece from Herman Hauser, the co-founder of Arm. He said it was sad. He said he felt it was like losing his baby. And he said that the problem for British technology was that decisions about its future would now be taken in Japan rather than in the UK. But he was also quite resigned to the inevitability of this deal, and I think that's becoming clear today. The government thinks this is an important sector, but it still thinks that it's equally important to attract new investment of this kind from around the world. Rita.
Rory, many thanks. The time is 17 minutes past 1. Our top story this lunchtime. France falls silent to mourn the 84 people who died and those who were injured in the Bastille Day attack in Nice. And still to come, did Russian athletes take part in large-scale doping at the Olympics, sanctioned by the government?
In South today, riding the wave. Olympian Bryony Shaw gets ready for Rio, and going for gold, the Weymouth woman has the wind in her sails. And it's how hot? We've got your weather forecast as the south basks in some long-awaited summer sun.
Later today, Donald Trump will be formally nominated as the Republican Party's presidential candidate at their national convention in Cleveland, Ohio. It'll mark the anointing of the billionaire businessman by the party in his race for the White House. But as James Cook reports, there have been protests ahead of the meeting amid national turmoil over the recent shootings.
Some say politics is a load of hot air, not the people flocking to Cleveland this week. They are the foot soldiers of the Republican Party, and they're here for an extraordinary moment, the crowning of a presidential candidate with no political experience.
Vice President
Donald Trump's rise has shaken the party and the United States, but along with his running mate Mike Pence, he is now the Republicans' only hope of the White House, and they know it.
There was some contention in the beginning, and I think that's smoothed out to the point that we're all uniting behind Trump one way or the other, and we're very excited about Pence being the VP nomination.
But millions of Americans are horrified by the idea of President Trump, and on the eve of the convention, they made their feelings known.
We will not stand for racism, xenophobia, and any type of these racist, sexist things that, this country is better than that.
We want a president for peace. We want to build bridges, take down walls, and we want to welcome immigrants and refugees everywhere.
Well, this protest has been noisy, it's been colourful, but it's been peaceful as well. It is, though, just the beginning of what could be an interesting week.
Because the demonstrations are driven by grief and anger as the United States grapples with shootings of black men by police and now police by black men. And the Republican convention will open by debating this very topic. The theme on day one, Make America Safe Again. James Cook, BBC News, Cleveland in Ohio.
Let's go to our North America correspondent, Rajini Vaidyanathan, who's in Cleveland for us now. And Rajini, gun violence and race have become key election issues now.
Yes, the events in Baton Rouge have quickly become political, and as James said just then, Make America Safe Again is the theme of today, the opening day of the Republican National Convention. And Donald Trump, in response to the events in Baton Rouge, really criticised President Obama, saying that there was a lack of leadership in his government, and also described America as a divided crime scene, which he believes will only get worse. And that theme of division is one which is likely to run through this week and indeed throughout the election campaign. Now, thousands of delegates will be entering this convention centre later today. There is huge security around this centre and indeed in Cleveland, and there will be protests expected later today, both pro and anti-Trump. And there have been concerns over policing some of these protests, with the head of the police union in Cleveland calling for a temporary suspension of the law which allows people in Ohio to carry their guns openly. Now, the governor of Ohio says that it's not in his power to overturn that law. But certainly many people here in the convention centre, many Republicans believe that the only way to make America safer is by retaining that right to carry their firearms openly. And certainly that is a discussion point that won't only just be one inside the convention centre, but across America as this convention continues this week.
Rajini, thanks very much. Turkey has detained thousands of people suspected of involvement in the failed military coup over the weekend and also suspended nearly 8,000 police officers. Turkey's Justice Minister called it a cleansing operation. EU foreign ministers are discussing the situation at a meeting in Brussels and have called on Turkey to show restraint. Nick Thorpe reports.
In Turkey, the purge continues. Senior military officers, the latest to be taken away by police from the Air Force Academy in Istanbul. The total of those arrested has now passed 7,500, from the army, police, civil service and judiciary. Dissident elements in the Air Force appear to have played a key role in the coup attempt. 8 airmen who fled from Turkey to neighbouring Greece appeared in court this morning. They have claimed political asylum there. In Istanbul, life has been returning to some semblance of normality.
The dramatic events of the past days have proven a massive personal triumph for President Erdogan. But what will he do with that victory? Turkish democracy has survived the attempted coup. How will it survive the cleanup operation?
The coup attempt and its aftermath is, I believe, is an opportunity for Erdogan, for President Erdogan, to continue to shape the country in the way they were planning to. And you might have seen in their rhetoric, in the party's rhetorics, and the leaders of the party have always said changing the Turkish system, bringing it back to its real roots, real historical roots, making religion a more significant component of the daily life of the society. So these things will continue.
Even before the coup, the tourist industry had taken a battering. Some 50,000 British tourists are still in Turkey. They have weathered the crisis, and most airlines are now operating without delays. President Erdogan himself has been attending the funerals of those killed on Friday night. They included personal friends, his former campaign manager and his 16-year-old son. Meanwhile, in the capital Ankara, more chaotic scenes as shooting broke out outside a courtroom. The last 4 military coups in Turkey succeeded. This one has failed. Luke Thorpe, BBC News, Istanbul.
Well, as we've been saying, foreign ministers have been meeting in Brussels all morning, and our diplomatic correspondent James Robbins is there for us now. And James, how much anxiety is there in Brussels about the situation in Turkey?
There is huge anxiety. I mean, there's relief that a democratically elected president, however authoritarian he may be, has not been overthrown successfully in a military coup. Not least because the EU relies on President Erdogan to stick by his deal with the European Union, in essence to stop migrants and refugees coming through Turkey successfully into the European Union. On the other hand, minister after minister has been queuing up this morning to urge Turkey, to urge President Erdogan not to abuse human rights in any way in its massive clampdown after this coup. So they're treading a very fine moral line between endorsing President Erdogan and perhaps being seen endorsing some of his repressive methods.
And James, this was Boris Johnson's first international appearance as Foreign Secretary at this meeting. How's he done?
Well, it's obviously very awkward, but he plunged straight in, Boris Johnson, this morning and said he'd come to tell his fellow foreign ministers in their first engagement that Britain leaving the European Union was not the same as Britain leaving Europe. Trouble is, many of his counterparts frankly think it is much the same. And it's awkward for Boris Johnson because for the first time ever, an American Secretary of State took part in, joined this meeting of EU foreign ministers. John Kerry is here enthusiastically championing the European Union and all that it stands for. So that's pretty awkward when Britain, of course, is on the point of negotiating its way out.
OK, James, many thanks. James Robbins there. In the next hour, an independent report into allegations of doping by Russian athletes during the Sochi Winter Olympics 2 years ago is to be published. It's expected to confirm allegations that cheating took place on a massive scale and that it was backed by the Russian government. The report will mean more pressure on the International Olympic Committee to ban the whole Russian team from next month's Games in Rio. Well, our sports correspondent Richard Conway is here with me now. So, Richard, it sounds very damning. What more can we expect in this report?
Well, that key recommendation from the committee, should Russian athletes, competitors be at the Rio Olympics at all, is one of the things we're expecting to hear about. Of course, Russian track and field athletes, they're already banned following previous doping scandals. But should there be a wider blanket ban? That is one of the things we'll find out about. The allegations are very serious. It stretches back to Sochi in 2014 and swapping of clean urine for contaminated urine from athletes under suspicion. That is the central allegation. We'll hear from Richard McLaren in around half an hour, and his results will be key to determining Russia's future in sport and, of course, the integrity of the anti-doping movement.
Richard, thank you very much. More than 2,500 young South Africans aged between 15 and 24 are infected with the HIV virus every week. As experts gather for the UN World AIDS Conference in Durban, the issue of AIDS and stigma will be high on the agenda. Our Southern Africa correspondent Karen Allen reports.
This was the moment when a little boy shamed the world. Nkosi Johnson's dignified demand for AIDS drugs for all and an end to stigma.
We are human beings. We can walk, we can talk.
Nkosi died shortly after, but not in vain. South Africa is turning a corner. 16 years on and millions of lives later, the rules of the game have changed in South Africa. Young men like Sanelli do now have HIV drugs, enabling them to do the things they love.
I was unfortunately born with it. Got it from my mother. I grew up in a family of 3 sisters, 1 brother and me and my mother. Never knew my father. I lost all of them. And the last one was doing what you're doing, journalism. She was fighting for our success. Unfortunately, she also died. So now it's between me and my nephews to build each other and become a stronger family.
With the support of friends, Sanelli's had the courage to speak out. Infected as a baby back in the day when leaders here were still in denial about the virus which causes AIDS.
I never asked for any of this to happen in my life, to lose my parents, to lose my financial helper, stuff like that, you see. I never asked for them to happen in life. So it happens, it happens. I have to live with it and be strong.
And he knows a new generation can't afford to take their eye off the ball. It's a mixed picture. Fewer babies are now born with HIV, but 2,500 young South Africans are becoming newly infected every week. This home where Sanele grew up was set up by Nkozi's foster mother, Gail. Virtually all the youngsters are HIV positive.
Good girl.
The good news is that they have the drugs to keep them alive. The bad news is that stigma and shame still persist, pushing many into silence.
They're still very nervous and very embarrassed about coming forward because they will be judged, they will be ridiculed, and they will be maybe rejected.
Yes, I had sex with Brave. Did you use a condom? She says no.
Changing attitudes to sex is key if infection rates among young people are to be reversed. Science may have moved on, but society is lagging behind, say experts. And AIDS is still a four-letter word that spells shame. Karen Allen, BBC News, South Africa.
Let's take a look at the weather now. Here's Ben Rich. Ben.
Rita, thank you very much. Good afternoon to you. If you like your summer weather hot, well, I think you'll like the beginning of this week because there is some hot sunshine to come today and tomorrow. But then the middle part of the week will bring some big thunderstorms. If you don't like the heat, hold out for the end of the week because things are going to turn cooler and fresher, but quite showery. We start the week with high pressure in charge, and as that drifts away to the east, when it opens the floodgates to this very hot air, which is going to start wafting its way up from the near continent, tomorrow will be the peak of this mini heat wave. But actually, it's pretty decent out there if you like the heat today. Plenty of fine weather and sunshine. But as you can see from the satellite picture, Scotland has had quite a lot of cloud, bringing some rain, although that increasingly will become confined to the far north and northwest. Could just be the odd isolated afternoon thunderstorm, particularly across northeast England. If you get one, you'll already know about it. Most people won't. Most people will see sunshine easily up into the high 20s, but somewhere in the south could get to 30 or 31 degrees this afternoon. Then through this evening and tonight, when it stays fine, there'll be clear spells. We lose the last of the rain for most of northern Scotland, maybe the odd patch of mist and murk for some western coastal areas. And these are the overnight lows. 19 in Manchester, 20 in Plymouth. Not particularly pleasant for sleeping. It does mean a warm, humid and a fine start tomorrow morning with lots of sunshine. Sunshine almost right across the board, and that is going to do wonders for the temperatures. Remember that hot air wafting its way up from the south? Well, we're really going to feel it tomorrow. Across the Channel Islands, 31, 32 degrees. Inland parts of England and Wales, 32, 33, maybe 34 or 35 somewhere. And that heat certainly stretching into North Wales, Northern England, Northern Ireland, even Scotland joining in. Even for the far north of Scotland, where it's been cool and cloudy with the rain, you'll get some sunshine tomorrow and your temperatures will rise accordingly. And it's going to be an extremely warm night, Tuesday night into Wednesday. Look at these overnight lows, 21, 22 degrees. Very unusual. A lot of heat and humidity around, and that is going to start to spark off some thunderstorms through Tuesday night, most likely across parts of Northern Ireland, Scotland, maybe Wales as well. And then during the day on Wednesday, those thunderstorms spreading into parts of Northern England, maybe the Midlands. Vicious downpours with frequent lightning, large hail, gusty winds that could cause some travel disruption. A cooler, fresher feel for many. Still holding on to some heat across the southeast corner. But if you don't like the heat, as I said, wait for the end of the week because things will turn cooler and fresher with the return of the showers. Rita.
Ben, thank you. Well, that's all from us. Now on BBC One, it's time for the news where you are. Bye-bye.